Good morning, Blue Jay friends, and thanks for being here. This is Blue Jays vs. Them, and I'm your host, Jerry Schwinnard. To my returning listeners, welcome back. If you're new and you just stumbled across this podcast or found me on Facebook or Twitter, thanks for clicking on the link. I hope you'll stick around and become a regular listener. For my regular listeners who haven't missed an episode, and you know who you are, and so do I can't thank you enough for your support and your kind words of encouragement. The second week of spring training is complete. You know, I gotta say, I appreciate that all the games from Dunedin are televised, but I can't understand this day and age that the rest of the games just aren't. If you have any questions or comments, you can always go to the website at www.bluejaysversusthem.ca. That's bluejaysvsthem.ca. Or you can always find me at Facebook at Jerry Schwinnard, JerryChouinard. You can also find me on Twitter at Jerry_Schwinnard. That's at JERRY_CHOUINARD. Someone did ask me about the World Baseball Classic a short time ago. I know the name of the show is Blue Jays vs. Them, but I'm sure you won't mind a bit of a detour a little bit later on. With that said, I do want to bring the show down to below the 15-minute mark. Last week's episode was just shy of 18 minutes. We do have a lot to cover, so let's get to it. In this episode, we'll recap last week's schedule, expand on the segment introduced last week, stats for pitchers and batters. Additional promos were announced, pitch clock and mound visits, as I talked about last week, scores from the second week of spring training, and we'll look ahead at the Grapefruit League schedule and the broadcast schedules, a quick look at the WBC, and some closing remarks. As I mentioned, last week's episode was just shy of 18 minutes. I think I put a little bit too much emphasis on play recaps. I got some positive feedback on the segment explaining some of the baseball stats. I think we'll keep that going at least until the regular season. I know everyone doesn't want or need me to explain player stats. Like I said last week, I never intended for this show to delve too deep into player stats. I know other podcasters will probably cover this better than I would. To be honest, this segment has forced me to look up some of them, so I'm not assuming I know what I'm talking about, but being sure I'm presenting the actual definitions, and I'm even learning a thing or two along the way. Last week I talked about wins and losses for a pitcher. Certainly, one set of stats you didn't think would need any explanation. It wasn't as straightforward as you might have thought. When you look at a stat line for pitchers, you'll likely see wins and losses in the first few columns, and then there might be win percentages. Well, simply put, that's wins divided by total number of wins and losses. Then you might come to the ERA, which we have already went over. This is sometimes followed with a column with G, which is simply the number of games they've made an appearance in, regardless of the innings pitched. BaseballReference.com has an expanded stats line, more than the MLB app, so I'll go over a couple that might not appear all the time. Usually the next column in the pitching stat is GS, which stands for games started, no explanation there. GF is a column that Baseball Reference has, which is games finished. This is not the same as pitching a complete game or a save. That's the final picture of any given game. A complete game, although seems to be an accomplishment that happens less and less, as the focus now seems to be pitch counts and relief pitching after 6 innings. But a complete game is what it sounds like. A pitcher who pitches all 9 innings and, on the rare occasion, into extra innings if needed. Yes, it's happened, although you'll never see it in today's baseball. I think that'll do it for pitchers this week. Now for batters. Last week I covered the OBP, or on-base percentage. This refers to the percentage of times a batter reaches base per plate appearance. When you look at a batter's stats, one of the first columns you might notice is PA, which is plate appearances. And it's exactly what you think it is. But it figures into so many other stats I thought I should at least mention it. It is the number of times a player comes to home plate offensively, regardless of the outcome. The next stat might be H, which is hits, and for novices that's not as clear-cut as you might think. Anytime a batter hits the ball within the foul lines and safely reaches base, that constitutes a hit, with 2 exceptions: an error on the defensive player or a fielder's choice. An official score of the game will determine if there's an error, but it pretty much is what it sounds like. If a defensive player misplays the ball, either catching, retrieving, or throwing it, and it allows the hitter or a runner to safely reach base or advance, a fielder's choice might be pretty much what it sounds like. The defensive play was to record an out on a different base runner, rather than the hitter. Of course, a hit isn't just a single base hit. It could also be a double, a triple, or a home run. Well, we'll get into that next week. So, how are we feeling about the new rules? So far, I've liked what I've seen. I wasn't a fan of the shift, but I had to admit, it was an innovative idea that wasn't against the rules. The way I see it, baseball closed a loophole that was allowing defensive realignment that wasn't specified in the game, but implied by the position titles. What do you think? Did you like the shift? Let me know. The bigger bases. I know there might be traditionalists or purists out there that don't think the base sizes should be altered. It changes the game. Okay, sure. But there were a couple things about the new bases that Buck Martinez pointed out beyond the increase in size that I'd like to reiterate here. Not only are the bases larger, which might help with collisions at first, the bags are also flatter, and according to Buck, the surfaces aren't as smooth as the previous bases, meaning they're now safer for the runners. Yeah, you could have implemented those changes on 15-inch bags, but they didn't. Both of these things I see as improvements, and I welcome them. One of the main purposes of the larger bags was to help encourage the running game, something that baseball has gone away from. It's hard to tell if the increased sizes and decreased distances between the bases have had an impact on the running game for the Blue Jays or not. Or is it the philosophy of new manager John Schneider? Perhaps a little of both. I previously mentioned a couple of our new acquisitions during the offseason who are accustomed to stealing bases, such as Dalton Varsho and KK, Kevin Kiermaier, along with Whit Merrifield, whom the Jays got mid-season last year. Just 3 players that were added since John Schneider took over as manager. Well, I guess the only way to tell if the bases have had any impact on the running game is when someone points out that steal attempts are up or stolen bases have increased over last season across baseball. Finally, the pitch clock. I know I said I'd talk about this and mound visits this week, but I'm going to table this till next week. I honestly didn't think I'd talk about the other 2 as long as I did. Well, I think the final promotional dates and giveaways have been announced. For pacing and timing, I'll skip over the 12 I covered last week. If you need reminding, I encourage you to go back and listen to the episode 3. I will also remind everybody of the giveaway nights throughout the season. All giveaways will be for the first 15,000 fans going through the gates. Here are the 10 new dates. The home opener, April 11th. The first 45,000 fans will receive a Blue Jays light-up wristband. And exiting will receive Blue Jays 2023 magnetic calendar. Looney Tuesdays are back. Starting April 25th, Looney Hot Dogs. April 29th versus the Mariners is Blue Jays Sesame Street Day. Special ticket will include game ticket and Blue Jay Elmo bobblehead. Junior Jays Sundays resumes April 30th. Kids 14 and under can run the bases after the games. Sunday, May 14th, Mother's Day, Alek Manoah bobblehead. May 19th kicks off the May 2-4 weekend, Blue Jays foam hat presented by Ryobi. And May 20th, a pickleball paddle. July 1st, Canada Day, will be Blue Jays Lakeside straw hat. July 28th, Blue Jays Caribbean Carnival with a terry cloth bucket giveaway hat. July 29th, specialty ticket will include Grateful Dead t-shirt. There will also be $1 hot dogs. The date everyone's talking about, August 12th, will be Jose Bautista Level of Excellence Day. Bautista bat flip bobblehead will be available for the first 15,000 fans. I think I'll end it here. Next week, I'll go over the remainder of the promotional schedule. Last Thursday, the Jays faced a split squad Pirates team. Manoah got his first start going 1 2/3 of an inning, giving up 1 run, a walk, and striking out 2. Nate Pearson came in, inheriting bases loaded, walking the first batter in 8 pitches to score the tying run. He gave up a base hit after a strikeout. 2 fly ball outs left the runner at first. Pirates once again tied the game in the 6th after the Jays had taken the lead in the 3rd with a Bichette single scoring Kiermaier. The game ended in a 2-2 tie when the Jays failed to score with bases loaded and bottom of the 9th with none out. The Pirates scored 2 runs on 6 hits with no errors, and the Jays scored 2 runs on 7 hits with 2 errors. Also of note, new father catcher Alejandro Kirk joined camp after the birth of his daughter Emilia Julien. Congratulations to Alejandro and his wife Sofia. Kirk, who was scheduled to compete in the WBC for Team Mexico, has withdrawn due to the time away he's already missed at camp. He will need a few days at camp before getting into any spring training games. I don't expect to see him on the roster until Monday or Tuesday. On Friday, the Jays hosted the Rays at TD Ballpark. Kevin Gausman got his first start of the spring, going 1 2/3 of an inning. The Rays' Josh Lowe singled and stole second and advanced to third on a pass ball by catcher Rob Brantley. Gausman struck out the next batter, gave up a walk, and a force out at second allowed Lowe to score the game's first run. Gausman would strike out the next batter to end the inning and the first batter of the second inning. After Vladdy caught a line drive to record the second out, he was replaced by Jackson Reese, who struck out his only batter to end the inning. Down 6-4 in the bottom of the ninth, Phil Clark hit a one-out double and moved up to third on a ground out by Zach Britton. Clark scored on a single. The next two batters walked and loading the bases. Rainier Nunez, with 2 outs and a full count, hit a 2-run walk-off single to center field to win the game at 7-6. The final score, Rays 6 runs on 8 hits and 1 error. The Jays 7 runs on 8 hits, 2 errors. I feel I should be mentioned that Vladdy felt some discomfort in his knee during the game. He has since announced that he's pulled his name from competing for the Dominican Republic in the WBC. I personally think this is the right thing to do. On Saturday, the Jays got their second look at the Detroit Tigers when they traveled to Lakeland for a game. The final score of the game was Blue Jays 18 off 15 hits with no errors, Tigers 5 runs off 12 hits with 4 errors. Then on Sunday, they hosted the Phillies in Dunedin. Jose Brios made his second start of the spring, going 3 complete. Although he looked a little rough to start and gave up 2 runs in the first, he did settle down nicely in the next 2 innings. One thing Buck said during the first was that Brios started calling his own pitches, using PitchCom. I think once he abandoned calling his own pitches and let Jensen take over, that's when he started to settle down. I gotta agree with Buck. Most pitchers shouldn't call their own pitches. They already have enough to think about. Defensively, he got some help from a sliding catch from Dalton Varsho. Say what you want about losing fan favorite Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and prospect Gabby Marino. Well, I'll give you my thoughts on losing Marino another time. But defensively, there's no question in my mind that Varsho's an upgrade, and I think he'll quickly become a fan favorite. Of course, Chris Bassett came in to start the fourth and completed 3 innings. Almost contradicting himself, Buck acknowledged that someone like Bassett, who features like 6 different pitches, can and should probably call his own games. Bassett gave up 2 runs on 3 hits and struck out 3. He also issued only 1 walk. The final score, Phillies 4 runs off 9 hits with 1 error. The Blue Jays 16 runs off 18 hits with 2 errors. The Jays had the day off on Monday, but were right back at it when they returned to Bradenton to face the Pirates for the 3rd time on Tuesday. Kikuchi pitched 3 strong innings, giving up no runs, no hits. He did walk 2, but he also struck out 2. The final score, Blue Jays 2 runs off 6 hits and committed 2 errors. The Pirates scored 7 runs off 6 hits, no errors. Yesterday, the Jays hosted the Minnesota Twins. Alek Manoah pitched 3 1/3 strong innings, allowing 1 run off 3 hits and striking out 4 batters. Twins pitching stymied the offense, allowing only 4 hits and no runs. The final score was Twins 7 off 12 hits, the Blue Jays no runs off 4 hits. The Blue Jays finished their second week of spring training 6-5 with 1 tie. Later today, the Jays will have a split squad day. One game will be played at Tropicana Field to face the Rays, while the other will be in Dunedin hosting the Atlanta Braves at TD Ballpark. Friday at JetBlue Ballpark in Fort Myers to get their first look at the Red Sox. On Saturday, they host the Orioles. Sunday, back to Clearwater and Baycare Ballpark to face the Phillies. And on Monday, they'll host the Red Sox. Tuesday, the Jays will face the Yankees at George Steinbrenner Field in Tampa. And on Wednesday, they'll play the Pirates for the 4th and final meeting before they meet in the regular season May 5th at PNC Park in Pittsburgh. The World Baseball Classic. The tournament will run from March 8th through to the 21st. For a lot more information, you can go to the WBSC.org website. There's a link there for the WBC. It will actually take you to the MLB.com website. Canada, along with Team USA, Mexico, Colombia, and Great Britain, are in Pool C, and they'll be in Phoenix. Canada will play their first game on Sunday at 12 noon. Well, that should do it for this week's episode of Blue Jays vs. Them. I want to thank you for spending your time with me and listening to me prattle on about the Blue Jays. I hope you join me next week. If there are any questions or comments, you can leave them on the website right below the episode. Or you can ask me on social media if the links are on the website. But you can find me on Facebook at Jerry Schwinnard, that's Jerry with a J, and on Twitter at Jerry_Schwinnard. Join me next week. We'll finish off the announced promo nights, continue with our stats definition segment, and recap the week that was. Any player news as the teams whittle away down the roster, and a look at the 4th week of spring training. Well, you can now find this podcast almost anywhere podcasts are available, and I'm working on the last 2. If you're listening from a podcast provider, please subscribe and leave a good rating. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps the podcast a great deal, and it would mean the world to me. If you came across this podcast on Twitter, please reply, and retweet. And on Facebook, you can leave a reaction, comment, and share the post. These things don't cost you anything except a fraction of your time, but it helps to bring awareness to the podcast, and again, it would mean the world to me. I'm just starting out, and every little bit helps. As always, I'm your humble host, Jerry Schwinnard, and you've been listening to Blue Jays vs. Them. Once again, I want to thank you for spending your time with me, and I hope you join me next week. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Go Blue Jays, go. Bye-bye.